What's going on, you guys? Welcome back to the channel. In today's video will be part 1 in recreating the kind of adventure capitalist classic idle clicker style game, and we're going to do it using Python and Pygame. So before I get started, if you do find this or anything else on the channel useful, feel free to leave a like on the video, subscribe to the channel, it helps me out a ton. And without any further ado, let's get into it. So anytime you're going to build a new game in Python, you want to import the Pygame module right away, and then do the pygame.init function. And then I always start by creating my game loop. So I create a variable called running, and then I'm gonna put all of kind of the action. I'm gonna put all of the action for the game inside this like while running equals true logic, and this is basically handling your exit and your quit conditions. So then you just go down and say for event in Pygame dot, wow, that is some bad typing. For event in Pygame dot event dot get, and then the first one you always want to put in here is just if event dot type equals Pygame dot quit, and then we're going to use the Pygame built-in just running equals false. And then we're going to come down outside of the event circle, and we're going to just do pygame.quit. Okay, and so this is the bare minimum to create a game loop. You're essentially saying while running is true, do whatever it is we put inside the game loop, but then once running is false, go ahead and close out the app. This is just what's required to make the X button that auto-populates in the top right close your app when you're done. And then to actually just have a screen, let's go ahead and come up here where we initialized it, and let's go ahead and create a screen, and that's going to be screen equals pygame dot display dot set mode. Okay, and let's define some variables. We're making something that's kind of like mobile phone sized, so let's do 300 450. And then set the caption, so that's pygame.display.set caption. Okay, and then we are going to call this not adventure capitalist, so I can't get in any trouble legally. Okay, and then I'm gonna do something. This is something I like to do at the beginning of like every game. I like to make a color library so that the whole game I'm not just dropping in like RGB values. You totally can if you want, but I pull in this this sort of set of colors for every game, and I'll usually just select from these. So if you want all these same colors as we go through, I recommend just pause the video, copy these down real quick. They're RGB values. You can pull them off of the web if you want. You can play around with the settings if you want, but I'm going to be calling these colors fairly regularly throughout the app, so I recommend making yourself a color library. And then we're going to create a few more variables. So I'm going to say that for this, the background is going to be black. You don't have to do that with a variable if you don't want. And then I'm going to say frame rate equals 60. Frame rate equals 60, and we'll call that in the clock. And then we're going to use text a few times during this game. So I like to start by just calling out Pygame font ahead of time as well. So we'll do that here. I pretty much always use free sans bold until I'm pretty much done with the game and I just want to play around with settings like changing fonts and seeing how that changes things around. And then let's go ahead and create a Pygame timer. So this is actually how we're going to control the speed of the game to run it at 60 frames per second. So then you come back down into your game loop, your while running, and we're going to do timer.tick at our frame rate. Okay, so if you're completely baffled on where all of this is coming from and you don't just want to blindly follow through, there is a very like introduction to Pygame course on my channel. You can definitely check that out first if you want to get some background, or you can just follow along, and if you have specific questions, let me know about it in the comments below, and I'll get back to you as soon as I can. But okay, so the last couple things we need to do just to get something on the screen, we'll do screen.fill with the background color that we defined, and then a 0 for some reason. And then the last thing we'll do is we'll flip it. So pygame.display.flip, and that's just actually writing everything onto the screen. And let's see, that's probably all we need to do to just get a black screen. Yep, there we go. You see we've got our title, it's black, it's 300 pixels by 450, and the little X button in the top right closes out of the code. So that's pretty good. Now let's actually start drawing some objects onto the screen. That'll be, I think, a little bit more clear and a little bit more fun towards like what we're actually doing. So I think since we're gonna create 5 tasks and we're essentially going to have them all be pretty much the same, let's go ahead and create a function called draw task, and that'll sort of tell us what we need to pass in as we're defining it here. So I'm picturing like a button on the left side of the screen. Let me just pass this real quick and then let's talk about it. I'm picturing like a circular button that you'll click on the left side of the screen, and when you click it, it'll kind of have like a progress bar on the right side of the screen as it's loading. And once it finishes, that's what actually gets you like points and money. So as we get more and more into the game, we'll add the functionality that actually makes it playable, but let's start by creating our objects that we need. So let's start with pygame.draw.circle, and we're going to put that on the screen. We're going to pass in a color, so there's the first variable that we'll need. We'll make all of our tasks a different color. And then for location, let's put it at 30. That'll get it away from the left side of the screen just a little bit. And then let's pass in a y coordinate for height. And so essentially they'll look exactly the same from top to the bottom of the screen. They'll just change y coordinate. So y coordinate, and then let's make these circles circumference of 20 and 5 thick, so they'll be hollow. That might be radius of 20. Yep. Okay, so that is gonna be a circle. Now let's put the rectangle down next to it. Pygame.draw.rect, and we're gonna put it on the screen. We're gonna make it the same color as the circle, and now rectangles need 4 coordinates passed in. So since the center of the circle is at 30 and it has a radius of 20, that's gonna push it all the way out to 50 on the right. So let's go with 70 to have a little bit of a gap between the circle and the rectangle. And then since that circle is the center point, and for a rectangle you define a corner, let's do y coordinate minus 15 so that it'll be essentially at the same height. Let's make it 200 long and 30 tall. Okay. And so that's going to be a solid rectangle of the same color that we call in. And so what I want to do as well to make it look like it's a loading bar is I want to draw a rectangle inside of that is going to be just black, so that it looks like a hollow loading bar rather than a full, like, colorful rectangle. So we're gonna add some coordinates, 75, so it'll be a little bit further to the right, and then y coordinate minus 10, so it'll sit inside of the rectangle, and then it'll be 190 by 20. All right, and as soon as we draw this onto the screen, it'll all make sense. So if you're following along line by line, just keep following along. It's gonna look pretty good once we call this. So let's go ahead and actually call one here. Let's start by drawing green. So let's do draw task, and then we give it a color and a y coordinate. So let's give it color of green, and then for y coordinate, let's give it 50. And let's just see if that puts a circle and the rectangles on the screen. Yeah, so I think that looks pretty good right there. And the nice part about doing it as a function rather than writing all that code for green is I'm going to take this exact same code here, and we're going to do red, orange, we'll do white, and we'll do, so let's see, red, orange, let's go with white, and purple. So this is kind of where if you're following along and you want to play around with those settings and make them different colors or different RGB values, like do that. Make this game your own, whatever you're going to enjoy looking at. I'm sure my colors aren't going to do it for everybody, so take a look here. I mean, I just using that one function we created, I was able to give it just 5 different Y values in 5 different colors, and we get this very colorful game where we've got what we'll create is going to be 5 buttons on the left and then 5 loading bars on the right. So that was pretty quick. I think that looks pretty sweet. Let's see what else can we do in this first video. Why don't we give a value to each button? So that'll be an actual showing how much money each of them is worth. So we're gonna have to come up to where we define variables in the beginning, and let's make another section called game variables. And let's go ahead, all those colors that we just made, let's give them a value. So there's gonna be green value, red value, and you can play around with these if you want. I'm gonna just go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 to start, because my theory with games is you gotta make them functional and fun to play before you really worry about little modifiers and difficulty and things like that. So let's get this functional as fast as possible. And all right, so we just created the values, so we're gonna pass that in as well, and we'll call it value. And what we're gonna do is we'll call this my value inside the function, and we're also gonna draw let's call it value text. You can call it whatever you want, but I think that'll make more sense. What we're going to do now is we're going to use Pygame's font.render. And if this is your first time seeing text being drawn onto a game with Pygame, it is a little bit weird. You have to render the font and then draw it onto the screen. It doesn't just know how to write text, so you have to do it in 2 steps. So that's why we defined a font up above, and that's why you do it with font.render. And so you give the value. We're going to use the string version of the value, so you have to convert value to a string here because it's looking for a string, and value is an integer or float by default. And then define a color for your text, which we'll make white. And then you actually put it onto the screen. And since everything so far has been in terms of that Y coordinate, we need to do the same here. So we'll put it at 16, which should put it just inside the circle that we defined. And then Y coordinate minus 16 should do it again. Actually, let's do minus 10, and that should put it just inside the circle. And then the last thing we have to do is actually the 3 places that we called it here: green value, red value, and orange value. We have to actually pass those values in for everybody. Oh, I gotta fix my green value there. So anytime you say you're gonna do something new inside the function, you just need to make sure anywhere that calls that function, you update what you're actually passing in. So let's see there. All right, so here you can see this will be the cache value of running each text. Running each task, and we've drawn it inside the button for each game to be run. So we've created the shell of our game in just under 15 minutes here, and in the next video we'll take a look at actually clicking those buttons and having the progress bar move across the screen and updating your scores. And part 2 in our creating an idle clicker adventure capitalist type app game in Python using Pygame. So this video is going to be a continuation in what we've already created, which is we've already drawn out this board which has what's going to be the 5 buttons displaying the cache value of each task, and then we've drawn the outline of what will become the loading bar for each task. So if you want to follow along line for line, I recommend you either pause this video on this code so that you can copy it down, or go back and check out part 1 in the series. But without any further ado, let's get into it. So the next thing I want to do is create it to where if you click on one of these buttons, a loading bar of different speeds, because obviously the more valuable a task is, the slower the bar should load. But I want to make it so when you click the circle, that bar goes across the screen from left to right, and then once it finishes, it's going to add money to your overall score. So to do that, we're going to need to kind of modify our draw task function here. And to do that, we're going to need a few new variables. So we're going to need a variable that's going to be true false Boolean, telling you whether or not it's time to draw the rectangle. So when you click the button, that's what will turn true. We'll say, okay, it's time to draw the button. And then what we'll need to do is pass in a value saying how long to make that loading bar, because what we're really doing is once per frame, we're going to update the length of that loading bar, and that's how we'll control the appearance of a continuous rectangle expanding from left to right. And then we'll want a third one that I'll call speed, and that's how we're going to determine which ones are the fastest and which ones are the slowest. And so if we create all of this code inside of our draw task function, we don't have to do it 5 times for each of the different colors. We can just do it once for all of it, as long as we write it generically. So now that we're passing in draw, length, and speed, let's go ahead and take a look at what we're actually going to do with those. So we're essentially saying that if the draw condition is true and length is less than 200, because that's the length of the full bar is 200. Well, if those are true, then what we want to do is we want to add speed to the length. So length is going to start out at 0 for all of these because it's going to start out unclicked. And we're going to make the speed of like green, which is the top rectangle, we'll make it 1. So each iteration, it's going to add a value of 1 to the length. But then that speed will go up to 2, 3, 4, 5. Actually, I'm sorry, I have that backwards. The fastest one will be green because it's worth the least money. And so we'll modify that using speed. And then we'll say else, we'll do elif length is greater than or equal to 200. Then what we need to do is we need to turn that draw variable equal to false, and then we'll make length back equal to 0, and then we'll do one more thing, which is we'll actually add the value of whatever was just finished. We'll add that to a variable called score, and since score is going to be the same, it's going to be your like constant money pot that you've made during the game. We'll just make a global variable called score rather than do it as an individual. Okay, and so the last thing is we're going to draw a third rectangle, and this is actually going to be the loading bar. So we're going to do pygame.draw.rect. We'll put it on the screen again. This one will be green, just like the first one that we made. Although, sorry, not green. It's going to be whatever color because we're keeping it generic. And then this one is going to be 70. And then this will be y coord minus 15, just like the first rectangle. And then the biggest difference between the first rectangle and this one is it's going to have that variable length as telling us what length to make it. So we're going to need to pass a few things back out now. Since we actually want to be able to click on the circle, we have to call it something. So we're going to return task, which is going to tell us where the circle is so that we can click on it outside of the function. And then we need to return the length, and we need to return the draw variable. So essentially anything that we modified in here that's going to be not global. So score we don't need to return, but these 3 we do, because we're modifying them in the outside world even though we're passing them into a function. Okay, so now we need to make a lot of variables in the outside world that we just called in this function. So let's go up to our game variables, and we're going to have 5 new true false variables for drawing all of our colors. We'll have draw green, red, orange, white, and again, whatever colors you want to make. It's definitely more fun if you're following along. If you make this game your own, change around some colors, change around some values, make it fun for you, change up some speeds, change up some monetary values, whatever you want to do. But essentially these are going to be the variables that say when something is active or when it's not. So like when you haven't clicked the button yet, this variable sits at false, but then once you click it once, we're going to draw that rectangle once across the screen, and then once the rectangle is finished, it'll go back to false. So that's going to be the draw variable. And then we have to make all of our length variables, which are going to start out as zeros because just like I said, since everything is false to start, none of it's been clicked, we don't want that rectangle to even really populate yet. So we're going to give them lengths of 0, orange, white, and purple. I really just picked these colors because I knew they'd show up okay on a black background. You do whatever you want. And then the last one we added was speed for each of them. So like I said, the green speed needs to be the fastest, and the purple speed will be the slowest. But again, you can, this is really one of the spots where you can really make it your own game. Play around with how quickly things change, different values, whatever you want. And that's going to really change, like, every time you play the game. How things modify and get changed will be based on variables like speed and value that you can modify. Okay, so those, and then we want to make a global score. So to start, it's going to be equal to 0. That's going to track your money throughout the game. And then we're returning task length and draw, and we need to pass in those 3 extra values to all of these. So let's see, I think it was draw, and then it was length and speed. So what's cool, we wrote that code to be generic, and now we can just add the variables to each of them. Okay, and we're returning task, we're returning length, and we're returning draw. And so just like this, we can do this exact same procedure for all 3 of these now. So instead of task 1 green length and draw green, it's going to be task 2 red length and draw red. And then the next thing that we'll do as well, and instead of green value draw green, green length, green speed, we need to just put all of that in terms of red. So you can follow along if you want. You can speed forward a little bit if you see where this is going, because I am just going to take the next minute here and add these task length, draw, all these new variables to each of them. Just takes a minute. There's nothing too novel to say at this point. But then the other thing you might be wondering, I just kind of made that task thing where we pass the button, the circle back, and we're assigning it to this variable task whatever. The next thing we're going to do, because really all this stuff we're doing right now is meaningless until you are actually able to click the button. So that's what we're going to be doing next, is taking that task variable that we're passing back, and we are going to use that to actually do something. When you click on that task, we are going to make the rectangle start getting drawn. So that's what we'll do next. And task 5, here we go. You may be looking at this and seeing a lot of duplicate code and saying, well, hey, I could write like a for loop, put these in a list and iterate through the list. Definitely you could do that if you want to optimize this code a little bit. I think this is kind of easy to see everything laid out and just understand where it's all coming from, but you definitely could eliminate some lines of code if you structured this to be like in a for loop and run 5 times throughout the for loop. So I'll just go ahead and run this, make sure I don't have any errors, but like I said, it's not going to run. Yeah, it's not going to run yet because we can't click on the buttons yet. So now we're going to go into our event handling code here, and we're going to add some stuff based on no longer if event type is quit. Now we're checking to see if event type equals, and this is going to be pygame.mouse button down. So this is when you click the mouse. And the reason I passed those tasks now, hopefully this is what you've been waiting for. If you can use a Pygame built-in collide point function as long as you're getting a Pygame object. So we're pulling that circle back out of the function that we drew, and now we can use collide point with event.pause. So that event.position is something you pull back anytime you click. So event type equals mouse button down. the event position is going to have an X and a Y coordinate based on where you clicked. And so what we're saying is if wherever you clicked was on that green circle, then we want green to be equal to true. Okay, and we can copy this exact code and we'll do it for all 5 tasks. So task 2 collides with a mouse click, then we're going to draw red. If task 3 collides with a mouse click, we're going to draw orange. If task 4 gets clicked on, we will draw white. And if task 5 is clicked on, then we will draw purple. Okay, so now let's run it, and I'm hoping when we click this, all right, we get a bar of different speeds. So I'll go ahead and run a few of them, and you can see they run at very different speeds. Green is way faster than purple. I can start red after green and they'll finish at the same time, or red before green and they finish at the same time because green is faster. So again, if you're unhappy with the different speeds, you can change them around. You could make green a 10 and purple a 1 and everything else in between. You can modify them, play around with it as much as you want. The last thing I want to do in this video is actually track your money. So we made that score variable, but we haven't put it on the screen anywhere. And I think that's what we should do next. So it actually will show you what the benefit of getting money is, right? Because we made it so that in our function it adds to your score every time one of those things completes, but we haven't shown that on the screen anywhere. So I'm gonna use that text again, and to concatenate text, you want to do a string, and some of this, as we get into it, is going to start adding decimals. It can get really weird with rounding. So I'm just gonna round this to 2 decimals for when we do start making it to where you can buy more and it starts giving you fractions of dollars. Just round so it doesn't give you 11 decimal points. But then, so the first thing is to define what text you want, and then after that you say true, and we want this to be white text on what we'll call a black background, and then we need to put this on the screen somewhere. So I'll put it at the very top. I will say screen.blit. Blit is block transfer, I believe is what it stands for, but it is just Pygame's built in okay, now draw it onto the screen function. So that's what it means. And let's see if we run this now. Okay, we get money 0. Let's see, we had $1, we had $2, 3. All right, sweet. So that's working. And now in just 2 videos, we have created basically the basic concept of an idle clicker. So in the next videos, we'll add the buttons to where you can buy more of the product, which will increase the value of each task. And then we'll also add the buttons for the managers, which are going to automate it once you buy them for a hefty upfront cost. They'll run each task automatically for you. A big piece of the Adventure Capitalist and all these idle clicker games is there are buttons where you can buy more of each product, or you can buy managers to automate your stuff. So that's what we'll do in this video, is we'll draw those buttons onto the screen and set up a system where you can kind of advance the game and get progressively more money as you go about it. So we already draw a lot on the screen in this draw task. So I'm thinking to draw the buttons on, let's create a new function. You could absolutely continue modifying the draw task function if you want, but you're going to get to a point where you have to pass in 12 variables and you get 6 things back. And I think since this is kind of a separate task and separate idea, I like the idea of doing it in its own function. So let's take a look at it. Since these are going to be buttons, in the same way that we called the task above, we gave it a name so that we could return it. Let's just anticipate needing to return both of these. And so we'll say color button. So this will be the first one that lets you buy more of each color. And let's say that's going to be a rectangle, pygame.draw.rect, just like before. And we're going to put it on the screen, and we're going to make it a color. So just like before, we'll want to pass in a color variable. That'll be one of the things we need. Another reason I really like thinking about this in terms of like a function and writing the function first is it points out to you what variables you need to pass in and what you can expect to get back out. So there's no right and wrong way of doing it as long as it works in the end. But I like doing it this way. So we're going to pass in color, and then before we passed, we just needed to change a y coordinate, right? Well, I'm thinking for these, we're just going to change an x coordinate. So we'll make the green buttons all the way on the left of the screen, and we'll have the purple buttons all the way on the right, and we'll space them out that way. So we're going to pass in an x coordinate, but then for these buttons, for the top row of buttons, I think we'll put them at 340. That should be below all of the tasks. And then we'll just make it 50 wide and 30 tall. So that's a good sized button, and we'll have to pass in an x coordinate. And that'll be the first button. And then let's go ahead and say we're going to want to display on the button how much it costs to buy that. So we'll call that color cost. And I think what that means is we're going to need to pass in a variable that's cost. So we'll keep track of how many are owned and how much it would cost to buy the next one in the outside world. So we'll pass that in, and we'll do font.render because this is going to be text, and we'll do string of the cost. And I think just like before, I'm going to do this with any text that we display that could be fractional. I'm going to round it just preemptively so it doesn't give us issues later on. And we'll make this black text because it's going on a colorful button, and that'll be a little bit easier to read. And then let's do screen.blit, and let's put color cost right on the screen. Spell it right would help. And we are going to screen.blit cost, and then let's use that x coord again and just scoot it to the right a bit so it's not fighting for screen space. And then we'll put it just a little bit below the start of the rectangle, so it should pretty much be in the middle of the screen here. And let's go ahead and say for the manager, I think it only makes sense to display a button to let you buy the manager if it's not already purchased. So we'll pass in a variable called owned that'll say whether or not you've bought the manager for that color already. And if it hasn't been purchased, that's when we'll display what I'll call the manager button. So we have the color button and the manager button, and essentially everything else will be just like what we had before. So I'll actually copy this, save us a little bit of time, and all we'll really need to do, it'll still be on screen, it'll still be on the color, and it'll be at that same x coordinate. Let's just move it down the screen a little bit. So we'll put it right underneath that first button, and then we'll call this manager cost instead of color cost. We'll scoot it in. And actually we should probably call this manager text, because I think since we're already using a variable called cost and we have to pass another variable in, we'll want to pass in manager cost instead of just cost for the manager. All right, so I think I like that. And let's go ahead and pass in manager text. And then just like before, 350, we want to move that down a little bit, so we'll put it at 410. And I think that will draw a cost rectangle and a manager rectangle on screen with whatever costs we pass in. So you can see right here, I think we need to create 3 new variables for this function as well for using these and calling them, but we just know right away too, we're going to return the color button and the manager button. Okay, so I think that'll do it. Let's go ahead and create cost, owned, and manager cost for everything up in our game variables section. So this is getting pretty long, the game variables, so I'll make a new one that's draw buttons function. And we're going to have green cost, which I think we'll start out just charging what the value of it is. And again, you can mess with this as much as you want, but then to start, none of the managers are going to be owned, so we'll make that false. And then we'll make the green manager cost, let's make it 100. You want the manager cost to be significantly more than like just buying one more of each item, because it's going to be like a one-time purchase, but then once you've bought it, like it's running the thing for you. So it should be difficult to buy them the first time, I think. So that's why I'll make the managers all like kind of quite a bit more expensive than just buying like the next of each thing. But so, okay, we go green, then we go red, then we go orange. And again, once we get into the code of actually like what happens when you click on each of these things and buy them, that's when we'll start playing around with like how to also make it so that it costs more to buy more of the thing. As you've purchased 10, 20, 100 of them, it should get more expensive to buy them because you're also going to be upgrading the value of each task. So let's see here. I think we'll go for the manager costs. We'll just go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 to buy the initial one. They'll all be false to start because none of the managers will have been purchased. But let's start getting, as you buy the more expensive managers, let's make it really to where like you feel that cost. So we'll say 4,000 and 10,000. And that may seem really high because like to start off, you have to click every button to get every dollar. But try to think like purple manager is the highest thing you can buy in this game that we've created. So you want it to be like an achievement. Okay, so we've created all those variables and we've created our function to draw the buttons, but we haven't actually called drawing the buttons yet. So let's see, we're going to be getting color button and manager button back. So let's say green color. We'll just say green button. That's probably easier. I'll say green buy and then green manager buy is going to be equal to, and we're going to get that back from draw buttons. And then we are going to give this guy green. We are going to give him an X coordinate of, let me see what I went with, 50. We are going to pass in the green value. We are going to pass in draw green. We are going to pass in green length. And we are going to pass in green speed. Nope, that's the task. I passed in the wrong things. 1 second. We are going to do green. Sorry about that. I passed in the variables for the task drawing. So we're going to give it green. We're going to give an X coordinate of 10. And then the variables we just made, which are green cost, green manager cost, and then we are going to give it green owned. So whether or not the manager has been purchased. And before I copy that 5 times, let's just run this and make sure the buttons show up where we expect them on the screen. Yeah, so something funky is going on here. Green manager buy, manager button. Did I not call it manager button? If not owned. I don't see a problem with that. Button, not owned. Let me see. The problem may be that if it is owned, then manager button just appears empty. So let's say screen.black, and let's call the manager button right here in the beginning. So just in case it's not processing this and it's trying to pass it back, let's see if that works. Okay, well, we get 1 button, so we're close. Black. Get rid of this. I don't want to tear apart this code. I feel like this should do it. Turn color button, manager button's right there. Rectangle. I'll get rid of the if not owned until we write the code for purchasing it, and we'll take a look then. It may be that there's no way to purchase it today, so it doesn't like that. So we'll see. But there we go. The other thing is the manager cost is showing up as 0. But we should be passing in, let me see. Green cost, green manager cost, green owned. I put those in the wrong order. Dang it all. So that was our error there. We passed in the wrong variables in the wrong spots. So this is a really important thing when you write multi-variable functions in Python. You have to make sure you pass them in the right order. So there we go. It's cost owned, then manager cost. Now I'm pretty sure that was the reason we couldn't use this, because it wasn't a Boolean, so it wasn't executing properly. Let's take a look now. All right, I feel a little bit better about that. Let's go ahead real quick and copy that in 4 times for the rest of the buttons. And then we will call it a video here, and we will take a look at actually finishing things out in the next video. So this is going to be red, 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 and we want to scoot it to the right by, I think, 60. So we'll make this 70. This now will be red cost, red owned, and red manager cost. We gotta do that orange. I'm gonna go ahead and copy the text. That'll speed things up a little bit. Again, I think I said this in the past videos. You can definitely set up for loops. Like if you were to create a list of your colors, you could definitely write some for loops. That would be pretty slick code that would go through and do some of this code that we do like 5 times for the 5 different colors. And you totally could use the same code to do it 5 times over. Sort of in the same way that we created generic functions to do a lot of this code like draw buttons and draw the tasks 5 times. You could do the exact same thing with all of these lines of code, but it does get a little funky. Like if you want to draw a rectangle onto the screen, but you need to change the name of that rectangle with every iteration, that can get a little weird. Plus this is a really easy way to look at it and just see it all in the same place. So then 190, 250, keep scooting at 60 to the right. Let's see if that draws 10 buttons on the screen for us. So there we go. We see the values. We see the cost of the managers. You can play around with spacing. I think I'm going to move the manager text a little bit to the left actually. So we'll say just x plus 2 because that 10,000 got cut off a little bit. Yeah, I think that looks better. And let's just real quick, let's throw in one last thing on this video. Let's actually put in text that says like what you're buying there. So let's make some text that I'll call buy more, and this will just go above those buttons where you buy stuff. And let's say font.render and then buy more like that. And we are gonna do true and white. Okay. And then we are gonna split that guy, and we're gonna put it for location. We will put it right above those buttons. So 10, 315 is right about there. And let's copy that, and let's go ahead and do another one that we can call by managers. And instead of buy more, we will say by managers. And then we just need it to go down a little bit. So we'll put that at 380. That's a little bit lower down on the screen. And let's take a look at that. Okay. Oh, well, it still says buy more because I didn't tell it to do by managers. Alrighty, hopefully that fixes that. Buy more by managers. So the buttons don't do anything yet, but our game is playable. We drew those buttons onto the screen. We did it in a function. So if we do need to modify those or use them in the future, we have one generic function. So hopefully you found this cool. Hopefully you're enjoying the series. We haven't set up the code yet to where buying those managers or buying more of these items does anything yet. So that's what we'll be doing in this video. Again, be sure to check out the previous ones if you do want to follow along line for line, but without any further ado, let's get into it. So I'm going to start with the logic for buying the managers because it's actually really straightforward. what we're going to do is we're going to say if the green manager, so we already, when we did the draw buttons, we have red manager buy and red buy, and those are the buttons that are going to be getting passed back. So we're looking to see if the button green manager buy collides with a mouse click. So we can come right into the code we already built for when you click on the tasks and piggyback off the framework that's there, and it'll be if the event position now that was clicked is colliding with the green manager buy button. But we need a few additional conditions because there's no reason to let them do anything if they don't have enough money. So their score, right, the money, has to be greater than or equal to the green manager cost for the button to do anything. And then we'll add another here, which is and not green owned. So if green is owned already, there's no reason to do this button either. But all we're going to do when it is clicked is two things. We're going to set green owned equal to true, because now you had enough money, you clicked on the button and you bought it. And then the other thing we need to do is we need to subtract out the cost of purchasing the manager. So now this should handle buying it, and this also will probably make the button disappear because we made drawing the button on the screen conditional on it not being owned. But what we haven't done yet is we haven't actually said what happens if green is owned. So let's go ahead and say if green is owned and green draw green is false. So actually we just say and not draw green. So what we're saying here is it hasn't been clicked on, but you own the manager, and we're going to set draw green equal to true. So another way to think about this draw green, we called it draw because it's what's actively drawing the progress bar, but it also could be thought of as like a green active variable. And so what we're saying here is if you own the manager and it's not active, set it active. So let's go ahead and run this, and before I copy this code 5 times, let's just get to 100 money as fast as we can, click them all, and let's see, when I get to 100 I will try to purchase that green manager button. It shouldn't let me do anything. None of these buttons are going to let me do anything yet because I don't have enough money, but now we're almost to 100. I'm going to buy the manager. Okay, local variable manager button referenced before assignment. Interesting. Green manager dot buy collide point. So let's take a look at our draw button function, because I think it should have let us purchase it there. If not owned, manager button buy. Oh, we need an else condition for this guy. That's my mistake. It needs to exist in all conditions because it's one of the things that we're returning, so the function's going to cancel out. So what we'll do is, since the background of the screen is black, we'll make it black when it's already been purchased. So just to speed things up so you guys don't have to watch me click around, I'm going to make it to where you start with 90 this time so we can test. So you can see all I did was change the initial money that we start with, but now, okay, I was able to buy the manager. And you can see once it's purchased, it goes away. You can click here, nothing happens, and that green task is running automatically on its own. So that's pretty sweet. I'm going to copy that real quick for the other colors. I'm going to change the initial score back to 0. Yeah, obviously it can take a while to test something the first time you write it, so you can do things like adjust your starting score to just give yourself an easier time testing, and as long as you remember to change it out, change it back to what the correct starting conditions are, then that's a really slick trick for troubleshooting a little more rapidly. So now we want that exact code for all 6 of our tasks, for all 5 of our colors, red owned. And obviously the cool thing about this is, you know, I'm just doing it with generic shapes and colors, but you definitely could substitute in like your own custom icons. Like that's what Adventure Capitalist does. They have like really fun little cartoon shapes for each task, and they have this like way of scaling it such that you feel like a multi-billion trillionaire by the end of the game. And so like what we're doing here is we're creating a framework where you can customize this game and you can spend all the time you want on the aesthetics, improving it down the line, but you have the shell of the game working really well already for you. So hopefully you find this useful. I had a lot of fun the first time I made this game, and so I decided to do a series on it. So change everything from green to red, and then let's go ahead and do that again for orange and white, and then we'll do purple. So I've said this in I think every episode so far, every piece of it. When you do see code like this that has to get essentially copied and just have like one thing replaced each time, you definitely could go through and do a for loop, and that's basically automating yourself a way of not needing to write the same essential code 5 times. For sure you can do that if you want. That'd be a little slicker. I am just doing it this way because it's really easy for me to keep like where each thing is. If you want to modify like what one button does at a time, it can be easy to do it this way, but I am spending a lot of time as a consequence of that, just replacing like the name of one color with the name of another. So there's definitely value in taking the time to create for loops that'll do this for you 5 times, but that should do it. Okay, so I'm not gonna run the test real quick. I don't want to chew up too much time, and we saw that it worked for the first one. So the next thing we're gonna do, it's gonna be very similar to what we just did here. We are going to handle what happens if you buy more of a specific task. So like if you pay the money to buy an additional green square, we want the value to increase. And we also want the cost of buying more to increase. So let's go ahead and use the same collide point. So I'm going to steal kind of this if task here. And I'm going to say if just green buy, so not green manager buy, collides with the mouse and the score is greater than just the green cost. And now we don't need the and not owned anymore. So what we're doing is we're checking to see if you clicked on the buy more green button and that you have enough money to buy it. And if you did, then we're going to do a couple things. We're going to increment the green value. So we'll do that first. We're going to add some value. And how much should we add? I think because this is the cheapest one, we'll just add 0.15. But then we also need to update the green cost, and I'll update it by 0.1. And here's why, again, make these values whatever you want them to be. Here's why I rounded those values when we drew the buttons on. When you give them decimal points, Pygame can do this weird thing, and Python, where it just tacks on, like, instead of 0.15, it'll say 0.14999975, because that's going on in the background of the computer. So if you do find yourself with crazy rounding issues, just go through and round it off to a couple decimal points. And then the last thing is you actually have to subtract out the green cost from your money, but you want to do that before you update the green cost. Okay, so let's go ahead and run this, and I think this will make it to where you can buy more green. Let's just check that real quick. Okay, so now you can see it's worth 1.15 every time, and we can buy a few more, and it looks like I actually forgot to round this value when we did our draw task. So let's go add that real quick so I can show you what I was talking about. Draw buttons, string manager cost, draw task. Yeah, so this string value, the value was just throwing out some crazy decimal points. So let's just round it to 2. But you could see right there, and I've only got the code in for green so far, but you could see right there. Yeah, so now we don't get those. Thankfully, we don't get those crazy rounding issues, and we can buy more of them, and that's really cool. Like now the green is worth more than the red just by running this for a little bit. So let's go ahead and copy that for all of them, and we'll just play the game a little bit. We'll get a few of the managers, and this is really when it starts to pay off, when you see all of your functionality finally programmed. Green. There we go. So then let's make this guy, this will be red for everything. And the nice part about the way we wrote this code, because we made everything a variable, is we really can just go through and find everywhere that said green and make it red. And then to make it to where you also you increase the cost by a progressively larger number, but you also increase the value of each task, because you want each task to feel kind of unique, and there's different benefits of getting to different checkpoints. Obviously the high-end stuff that takes way longer to finish should give you more money, and it also makes sense that it would cost more to continue upgrading those. So what I have here are just some default values that they're not going to be that crazy. I'm essentially saying, okay, well, the value is going to be directly proportional to the speed as well as the cost. So what I'm saying is it's an exact comparison. If you buy 10 white, it's going to give you more money, but it's also slower. So it's going to, I mean, it should make sense to you. My main point is, if you're designing this game and you want to show it to people and play it with people, I recommend spending some time to play around with the actual gameplay and change some values, change some speeds, add some code for oh, you get above 1,000 and then this happens or this happens. But I'm trying to help you guys build the framework of the game. So these are some default values I found were pretty fun in creating it initially and running through it. So let's go ahead and see now. First thing I do every time I play this game is I try to get myself a manager as fast as possible, even before buying more of any product, because I hate clicking around on all 5 tasks. It's really time consuming, so I try to get to 100 as fast as possible using all the tasks. Yeah, let's see, get ourselves a green manager, upgrade green a little bit more, because you can tell with how much now we get per execution of green, it's really worth it to upgrade him a little bit. Let's see if we can get it up to yeah, we'll get him above 6. And now we'll run the other ones a little bit. And I'll probably chop this up in the video a little bit to just highlight the different cool things going down. But yeah, if you stuck with it this whole tutorial and you built this game start to finish with me, I really appreciate you being here. I try to get a lot of these tutorials out every week, and I take a lot of requests. So if there's something specific that you want to see rebuilt in Python or Pygame, or you have any other questions about just software in general and writing programming, just let me know about it in the comments, and I'll be sure to get back to you as soon as I can. But hopefully you've enjoyed this series. If you did, definitely be sure to subscribe to the channel and be on the lookout for more fun content. And definitely I appreciate you being here and watching all these videos. And yeah, let me know if you decide to build this game and you add on to it and you add other features, what you do differently, because it's always fun to see how someone can take the framework of a project and really expand it out to make it their own. There's obviously a million different things you could do with this game, to really take it to the next level. But I think this is pretty fun, pretty cool to look at. I bought the second manager there now, and I'm only doing half the work, and they're making quite a bit more than me clicking these 3. So let's see, I'll just play around for a bit longer. And I will say this is actually fairly addictive, especially if you're doing something on your other screen, like you're writing emails or something, you leave this up on the left screen and let yourself get a whole bunch of money while you're not looking, and then buy a obscene number of upgrades once you come back with thousands of dollars. It's really it is addictive, which is definitely kind of the sense I got from it the first time I played it. The app Adventure Capitalist on my phone, where you just spend hours a day and you don't even realize it. upgrading it, and some fun things you could do with this game. You could make it to where the costs of upgrading are actually way higher, but then when you hit certain checkpoints, like everything multiplies times 2, like achievements. That's sort of the standard style of this game, is like if you get everything times 10, then you get a multiplier where the speed of everything doubles. Like the possibilities of things you could add on are endless. So I enjoyed making this a lot. I hope you enjoyed watching this series of videos and following along if you did. As always, I appreciate you checking out the channel. Be sure to leave a like and a subscribe if you found it useful. And if you want to see anything specific in the future, just let me know about it in the comments below, and I will try to get back to you as soon as I can. And as always, good luck with your code, and thanks for watching. Thanks, guys. Bye.